Welcome back, and sorry for the long wait, but here is the Royal Dromai deck profile everyone's been asking for. So, rather than waste your time, I'm just going to jump right into it and start talking about cards because I have a lot to talk about here. I'm probably going to be breaking this up over a couple videos. This one's going to be the just general deck profile, talking about like what you're trying to do with the deck and everything. And then I'm going to be making one that's talking about a sideboard guide, so stay tuned for that if you want to understand how to sideboard this. And then another one for like different card choices you can make because there's a lot of flexible card slots in this. And it ended up changing quite a bit for me over the course of the like 4 weeks I was playing this. So I will jump into that in a future video. But for now, let's talk about what we got going on here. So first of all, Crown of Dominion. This is the namesake of the deck. It makes you royal, and it lets you start the game with a gold. Why do we care about starting the game with a gold? As you see, we're not playing cash-in. Well, what we can do is we can use the gold on turn 0 to pitch 2 reds to it to make 2 ash and draw a card, which lets us do things like pitch another red to play a 1-cost dragon and then get an arsenal pass. It can let us do a double dragon turn 1 with 1 ash and no arsenal, which is very reminiscent of like a double aura turn 1 with prism. There's other cute things that you can do with it later on in the game if you didn't actually need to crack it early. It just really lets the deck... And so like with Dromai, you have the Ash engine that you're kind of fighting against a lot of the time just to play the game. And this lets you not fight your deck. You just get to start the game with Ash and just play the game normally without having to play this mini game as much. Letting us be a bit more aggressive with the core of the deck and the cards that we're putting in here. For instance, one of the things that I did, there was a card that I was talking about back when Uprising first came out being like a possibility in the deck, and I just couldn't find a build for it back then. And then I saw Mara, shout out to her, play this on the Goliath Gauntlet, and I was like, all right, I'll give this another try again, because it does kind of fit in with the ethos of what we're trying to do with the deck. It's just even more of this. Odd card here, Flame Call Awakening. So, Flame Call Awakening, what we're trying to do with this is we look for a hand with a starter. So, like one of these 0-cost cards here, one of these 0-cost cards here. You can do this off of a 1-cost, but it requires like a 5-card hand to do this. Generally, you can't plan for having a 5-card hand that means no blocks, but you can do it. So we open with a 0-cost starter, and then we play the Flame Call, and we pitch a red card, making an Ash. We pick up a Phoenix Flame, and then we pitch the Phoenix Flame either normally or into our Flame Scale Furnace, making us an extra resource because we already have a red in our pitch. And then we cast a Dragon or a Command and Conquer, or if we still have the gold around, we can crack the gold to just draw a card and just exchange the Phoenix Flame for a random card off the top of our deck, making us another Ash. So essentially what the Flame Call Awakening does in the list is it's a sweeping blow that generates 2 resources. Because when you play Sweeping Blow, generally, what you're trying to do with it is you pitch a red, play the Sweeping Blow, make 2 ash. In the case of this, we're playing Flame Call Awakening, pitching a red, making 1 ash, pitching the Phoenix Flame, making another ash. So it's the same thing, but then we also make 1 to 2 resources off of it. So it ends up just being a better Sweeping Blow. It's a Sweeping Blow plus 2 resources or a card. There's other things we can do with it too, like bottoming it with an E-Strike or something like that. And in a pinch, you can set it and use it as a starter for a future round. Like, let's say you've already got a board of dragons and you really don't need anything else anymore. You just need to guarantee that starter to close the game, and you don't really have anything to use it for right now. You just set it, forget it, wait for later. It might come up. And because we have this Ash engine of Flame Call plus the Crown, it lets us play with way more Ash than if we were just a big dragon deck. Meaning we can just freely cast a lot of our dragons without playing the minigame, as I was talking about earlier. And then what ends up happening is because of this and this, well, we have a lot more space to just throw numbers at our opponent because we're not fighting against our own deck. So we need this here because this is our starter package for the Flame Call. And you could even bump this up a little bit if you really felt like you needed to. I felt like this plus the 0-cost dragons was kind of a happy medium, but I could understand cutting some or adding some. It's really preference. And then we have a set of Chain Enders over here, plus the Blaze Headlong. This is kind of like a floater slot. what you'll find is when you play this deck, it actually kind of plays like an old school Briar deck. If you guys played during Tales of Aria when Briar was at its prime, 0 for 4, go again, 0 for 4, go again, 0 for 4, go again, and then a snatch at the end or something like that. And a lot of the dragons kind of function as that too. Like, if you cast an Asvalai and it tables and they have to kill it, that was a 0 for 6. That's incredibly above rate. So you're just presenting this aggressive game plan into a lot of matchups with a value package of the dragons. And most decks can't handle both the aggression and the value at the same time. And if you're ever in a spot that you're like, okay, one's bad in this matchup, you can kind of lean into the other one. And the other thing that this does is it gives us a lot of attacks against the Guardian matchup, letting us chip damage or force poppers out of their hand, which was one of the things that I've been trying to fix as well with the deck of... I really don't like the Guardian matchup. Like, the Guardian matchup's good with the old plans of just relying on your late game with different things, but it was just obnoxious to play. You just had to set up these, like, crazy second, third, fourth cycle pitch stacks and go to these, like, 50-minute games every time, and it was just obnoxious to play. I don't want to sit here doing that every round if it's, like, a Guardian meta. And if your opponent plays in a certain way, they can just drag out the game to go to time. It's just not an enjoyable experience, and it's very mentally fatiguing. So I wanted to try to get the deck in a spot where you don't always have to play the game like that, which the attack actions let you do, because you'll have a round where you'll go, say, play a dragon, and then throw a 0 for 4 at them. And it lets you weaponize more of your hand into them, versus before, a lot of times you'd be like, play my hand of dragons, push 1, they pop it, and it ends your turn. You didn't get to get any damage in them. You played your whole hand, and really, all you did was strip 1 card from them. So you'd have to play for this late game plan with all the dragons. This lets you still present the dragons that they have to deal with, but then also say, give me a card. Also, unless you're giving me a sink or something, you're going to take some chip damage. And the chip damage is very important in the matchup. It lets you get to these late game states where they've taken too much chip, so it turns your other things into lethal damage, like your Burn the Mauls, like your Dromai Moragai pitch stacks, your Ghostly Hands if you're playing that. And just the chip damage is very good in those matchups. So this has really helped with the Guardian matchup. It's also not bad against Icelander because it lets you just open with something that gives you go again. And just ask the question, how are you going to stop me from pushing my board? Because you can't just shoot my attack action and strip my action point. I'm going to play this 0 for 4. You still have to deal with everything else. If you would like to stop me, you still have to block this. So it kind of gives them like a forked, too many things coming at them at once, if you understand what I mean. And then the way that I have this divided here, just to kind of make sense of deck building, is we have our Ash neutral dragons over here. I consider Billowing Mirage a dragon. And then we have our Ash negative ones over here. So 12 and 9. So generally, if you got the gold and you make some Ash and you draw like maybe one of these over the game, you don't really have to worry about going Ash negative too much. You generally end up with a lot of extra Ash over the course of the game. We have our Ash engine here. We've got our starters, and then we got our chain enders. The logic behind the Blaze Headlong is very similar to things like Rabble, where it's like, if I'm playing in a matchup where my opponent's playing poppers, like, say, a Runeblade matchup, or Icelander, obviously Guardian, but, you know, they have some poppers. It gives you something to throw in the middle where you still get damage in. So, if I'm worried about playing around a popper, and I just go dragon, dragon, swing, and they pop, I didn't get any damage in, they just clear up my other dragon on their round, and I lose a lot of momentum. Where if I go dragon, blaze headlong, they still have to take some damage that round, and if they pop, now they're trading a card, and they're still taking damage. Ideally, I want to present something else to, or already have some dragons, but it kind of gives you, again, a way to attack them on multiple axes. That's a lot of what this list is trying to do. Not deal with your subgame of Ash while attacking on multiple fronts, so they don't have to just... Yep, I'm just going to ignore what you're doing because I have poppers. That's one of the easy ways to lose the game as Dromai, those two different things. I think that's pretty much it to be said with the ones right here. Burn Them All is a card that really went up in value for me with the Flame Calls. That was a card that I was slowly starting to cut from my deck, but it got much better with this. I also found that because we're playing way more aggressive cards, we load our graveyard much faster. So the Burn Them All can get cast early and then stick around for a long time. I had a lot of games where I cast it on like turn 2 or 3, and I got up to like 5 counters on it. So it was good value. It ended up being a 0 for 6 in those scenarios that still pushed my board. But you don't always want to cast it early because it doesn't actually give you any board presence. It's just a number on a card. And in a lot of matchups, you actually want to make your opponent start reacting to what you're doing, and that doesn't trigger a reaction out of them. You could easily fit in another Dust Up. I ended up shaving one near the end just for sideboard stuff of I wanted another equipment slot. And you'll notice that I'm not playing any of the big dragons here. Our blue count's very low, so it's kind of hard to cast the dragons, and when we go up on blues in some matchups, we're trying to use them for other things, not cast the big dragons, so they can be a liability. And they're a liability for poppers too as well. It's a lot of, we're trying to hedge for not just getting blown out by poppers with this list. I think you could very easily fit in Necria into the deck if that was a consideration you were making, or Vincerikai, but it's just, you gotta structure the deck a bit differently. I'll go more into that when I talk about card options in the next video. Alright. Moving on to the sideboard and equipment. We are Flamescale Furnace in every single matchup. That is the only chess piece that we're playing. And then we have the different options for the different matchups over here. Generally, we're Iron Rot in all the matchups. And then we're Ghostly Touch in the matchups that we have to play for those late games, like Guardian. Generally, this is a card that you just kind of put on the table and look at your opponent and they go, okay, I guess I can't fatigue you. But we still need to make sure that we can win a fatigue matchup if they decide to play that way, so we have some other cards in case they decide to play in a way and they just ignore this exists on the table. The Mage Master Boots are so that way we can flash in the Passing Mirage when we go for the Ghostly Touch combo. We pitch, we play the Passing Mirage, giving this no Phantasm, and then we pitch another blue, swing the Ghostly Touch, and we either present... We'll try presenting lethal in such a way where even if they block with every card in their hand, they're still taking damage. And if they block with 3 cards, they die. So they have to block with every card in hand. Meaning the passing will table, and I get to do it again next turn and kill them. The Silent Stilettos are for primarily Icelander, though you could bring them in other arcane damage matchups. I would consider it against Viserai because I don't necessarily want to present 0 AB versus them. You could consider making this No Rune Gloves or Quelling Gloves instead. Silken Form, I think is the name of it. And then most of the time, we're just Snapdragons, just so that way, in case we draw a cursed, like, multiple 0 for 4 no-go again hand, we still get around. And it does let us be more aggressive when we're winning. Like, okay, I didn't draw a cursed hand this game, and I drew a hand of, like, E-Strike Snatch. I'm just going to be aggressive and just say, nope, the game is basically ending this turn, or actually ending this turn. Go, like, E-Strike draw a card or something like that. E-Strike draw a card very good in the list because we're primarily reds in all the matchups. So any card at the top is usually good, unless you close the game out. Or you can just go +2 and just smork them more. And then we are Crown of Providence in the matchups that we have to play around Pummel CC, or we just generally value our life total and the Ash doesn't necessarily matter. Like maybe a longer game where we know we're just going to make infinite Ash, it doesn't really matter. Maybe like Lexi or something like that. But ideally, we're trying to be royal, so that way we can just play a very proactive game plan. And then over here, we have some defensive reds that are really just so that way we can't get blown out by certain cards. Again, we care about not getting blown out by Pummel CC, so the Sand Cover is very good for that. Sync for some of the aggressive decks, as well as Guardian, so that way we can preserve our life total. Because when we present this, we're pricing them into playing an aggressive game plan into us. So we're expecting them to try to race, so we don't want to deal with that too much, especially if they draw like a Crippling Crush or an Oaken Old into us. We want to not get blown out by that. And the Sand Cover is also very good against Icelander. We're a lot of the times looking for a Sand Cover once we hit mid-game and then just setting it. So that way, if they try going for lethal, because it's go for lethal and hope that the Dromai player doesn't have a way to stop me, or I lose the game anyways. It means that if we don't draw a hand of blues, they don't kill us. So they go all out for the kill, whiff the kill, and then lose on the spot. Similarly, we got the Thamais for that matchup, though they're also good against Oldhim, stops the hero ability, Blizzard, Crown. Just a fairly annoying card against Oldhim, but it's primarily there for Icelander. You could very easily go up to 3 copies of this. I'm back and forth on that. These kind of can rotate in and out. Like I like having like 6 slots for that kind of plan of just, okay, these are for like ice decks generally. Uvia, just in case they try fatiguing us in any given matchup that could go to fatigue, like Oldhim, like Dash, things like that. Just, nope, here's a recurring threat that you have to deal with, and you need to keep cards to immediately answer this, or you lose on the spot. And then we have Epot, mostly just to deal with Blizzard or expose the elements against the ice decks. Remembrance, so we can recur some of our threats, though I feel like that might be a cut from the deck. I was just worried about fatigue, and, given the nature of what happened at Indy, I think that was worth respecting. And then the Time Snap Potion, this is mostly for Guardian also. It's another way for us to do the Ghostly Touch if we don't have the ability to do Mage Masters, but what it also does is if we, we're nearing second cycle, or we're in second cycle, and we've kind of paid attention to what our opponent's pitching, and we're like, you've been pitching a mix of poppers and non-poppers. I think you don't have it. I think you have a popper light hand based on how the game's been going. You can go like Chromai, Moragai, Time Snap, and just basically say, have 3 poppers or lose the game instantly, because I just have too many action points right now, and I'm just going to run you over. And if you catch them on that, you just win the game on the spot. And if you don't, you still stripped their hand, and you're really far ahead. And they can't really do much back to you other than just push a hammer into you. There's a lot of instances where that can just like instantly win the game. And this is our package of blues that are coming in for the damage, arcane damage based matchups like Runeblade, or mostly Viserai, honestly. Not Briar, where we're not trying to necessarily prevent arcane damage that much in that matchup. It's mostly the on-hit effects we care about. And Wizard. I went with these specific blues. I think this is like a really interesting choice in the deck. There's like a lot of really good blue options for like different things you're trying to target, and it's all like in really niche choices. I went with this because I really wanted to respect Briar, the Mirror, and Oldhim. These are all fantastic in those spots. All 3 of these decks do not want to deal with random Ashwing. And in the Mirror, you're able to push the dust up into their dragon, kill their dragon, get an Ashwing. I really wanted this slot to be a blue block 3, so to check that box. And they're just cards that I'm not miserable casting in those matchups. Something else you can do is just make them the 2-for-6s with Phantasm. It plays very well with your Flame Call Awakenings, because you pick up the Phoenix Flame, and then you pitch that to the Furnace, and then just throw a 2-for-6 at them. But I found that I was not playing these in the matchups where I was looking to do that with this card. Like, I don't care about 2-for-6ing them necessarily in the Mirror. Sometimes I do, but a lot of times I just want that board presence, and these let me get that board presence against Icelander. I don't really want a Phantasm card to throw at their face that just gets popped and ends my round. So I want something kind of lower to the ground in that matchup. So it checks a lot of boxes. This changed a lot for me over the past month. So like, feel free to flub around with that slot. And then passing Mirage, you need it in a lot of matchups, and it's just a utility blue in the deck. It's how you're beating Guardian most of the time, and it's just very annoying if you slam it against a lot of decks. Like, if you just like throw that down against an Icelander or something, they're just like, oh, I guess I have to throw a Wounding Bowl at that, or ignore it for the rest of the game. And if that eats 8 damage, you're like super happy. But yeah, that's it for the deck. I will have a deck link in the description. If you guys have any questions about the deck, feel free to leave them below. I will get back to you guys on that. I might just answer them in one of the videos where I talk about other stuff with the deck. If there's anything else that you guys would like to see from me, please let me know. And make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. Peace, YouTube.